Hi guys, my name is Walid, and I'm so happy and honored to be here with you, part of the Perfecting Your Process Summit. And yeah, I'm going to be sharing with you a little bit about my own process. Um, it's not really perfect, but it works for me and it might work for you. So let's get into it. I've got some slides to share and then we can discuss. So yeah, I call it the 4 seasons of writing with me. And so, yeah, in South Africa, in Johannesburg, where I grew up, um, springtime is really this lovely time of change. And me, I really feel it. I love nature and I love spending time in nature. It's a real source of my inspiration and my calmness. And so after the long, cold, dreary winter, then it slowly starts to warm up and you feel this change in the quality, the intensity of the light. And then the first rains come and the grass starts growing and turning green and the leaves on the trees and the flowers start blossoming and it's really lovely. And yeah, and then it gets really hot and you get these thunder showers and lightning storms and now everything's really growing and buzzing with life, and we're eating watermelon and mangoes and lychees, and we're playing outdoors till late, and the days are long, and yeah, it's just this time of abundance and fun. And then it starts cooling down again, and the winds pick up, and dust in the air and smoke in the air, and the leaves turn this yellowish, orangish, crunchy, golden brown, and fall from the trees. And I used to love it, stomping in the crunchy leaves, but my dad hated it because he had to sweep these things. They were his nemesis. And then comes winter, it gets really cold in Johannesburg. It's this icy, freezing cold, bitter, chill wind that gets into your bones, and all the leaves have fallen off the trees now, and they all are shivering bare in the wind. And yeah, so and the days are short, and it's not time for outdoors activities. Everything goes like this pale, dull, brownish hues. So what does that have to do with writing? So to answer that question, I have to tell you a short story about the little boy who couldn't. And you might recognize that little guy there. So once upon a long, long time ago, there was a little boy named Walid. And Walid means little boy. It's the Arabic word. So he had a huge family with lots of aunties and uncles and tons of cousins. And every weekend, the whole family would gather at Big House, his grandparents' home. It was called Big House. And at some point, the kids would lock themselves away upstairs in the tower to work on their variety show of skits, songs, and magic. And Walid, around 10 years old at the time, was the writer-director, and his cousins were the actors and performers. I say writer, but they never actually wrote anything down. It was all in their heads. And then on Saturday night after dinner, everyone, around 50 to 60 people on any given weekend, would squeeze into the tower or gather in the spacious living room to watch the show. And what a show it was. But the little boy's father had other plans. He had mapped out his whole future for him before he was even born. His dad knew that he was going to be a civil engineer. Little Walid had been hearing these strange words, but he had no idea what they meant. It was the typical Indian immigrant thing. Your child had to be a doctor or an engineer or a chartered accountant, and his father was determined to have one of each. But Walid loved writing, and his friends and English teachers enjoyed his essays and stories, and they encouraged him, but no one else seemed to notice. So after a failed rebellion, he ended up studying civil engineering. 4 excruciatingly long years of complicated maths and science in a dull, stifling environment with no room for imagination and creative self-expression. His gift and his spirit withered away, and he became like a puppet dangling from invisible strings. That magical, delightful little boy grew up to be very fearful and anxious. He got an engineering job and bought a car. He got married and became me. But after working for 16 years in the engineering sector, however, I had a change of heart. I quit my job and we sold our apartment and all our furniture and stuff. And we packed whatever we had left into our Jeep, along with some canvases and oil paints, our guitars and cameras, and we hit the road on a healing adventure. For 6 months, we explored the south coast of Africa, and everywhere we went, we kept meeting all these interesting people and healers, musicians and artists, fellow explorers and adventurers. We would get to know them and try their healing therapies and enjoy their artistic offerings. And pretty soon, we were quite relaxed and full of inspiration and ideas. I couldn't wait to dive deep into the fascinating realm of psychology. For a while, I would be in this highly focused study mode, reading around 10 different fascinating books at the same time. Then comes the planning, writing phase when I'm in the zone and it's just flowing through me day and night for weeks and weeks until eventually I get stuck. Can't write anymore, don't feel like reading either. Now what? It was so frustrating until I realized what was missing. I needed to apply this knowledge and put it to the test in my own life and relationships before writing about it. And sometimes I had to just pack the whole thing away and clear my mind, just chill and let it mellow. And then after a while, when you least expect it, you find yourself back in the zone. And that's how I settled into this flexible rhythm of study, apply, write, relax. So it's quite simple, but not always easy. And the steps are: study when you need to, apply what you're learning, write when you feel like writing, relax when you feel tired and drained. Repeat, but not necessarily in the same order. So it's about knowing what you need next, but more about how you feel. And so, you really have to become more familiar with uh, your inner experience of what you're going through. And so the crux, the core of the whole thing is this, what they call the stepping stones to transformation. And so we begin with information, where there's a lot of stuff out there in all different forms, in all different media. And but what you expose yourself to and what you read about and what you study becomes your knowledge. But it's not really your knowledge because you've acquired this stuff. You've uh, yes, you can understand it and you can explain it. You can talk very intelligently about it, but it is other people's ideas. It's not your own. But within these ideas, you'll come across some kind of theory, some kind of idea, some kind of proposition or belief, that if you do this, then that is going to happen. If you try this, then it's going to have this kind of effect, So you boil down your knowledge to get to these seed kernels, and you have to apply them. You have to take action. You have to do something in your own life, in your own relationships. And, so the picture I put earlier on of the father and the son. So if you're a parent and your whole research and study is about how do I improve my relationship with your child, and let's say you're reading a book like Playful Parenting, so it gives you a certain exercise or application, to try with your child. Or you're reading a book like No Drama Discipline. These are brilliant books that completely changed my relationship with my daughter and improved and enhanced our connection, our bond. So that's not going to happen if you don't take action, if you don't do something, if it's just knowledge that stays in your head and that you talk about. Even if you talk to your child about it, it's not going to make the change. You have to apply. And once you take action, once you do something, you apply it, then it leads to change. And this changes, okay, it all depends on what you're doing, so it also changes the information you expose yourself to. It changes your knowledge. It changes the theories and ideas that come out of that, and it changes your action. And all these, I think I've got a slide on that, so let me not. Okay, I already explained this. So it changes how you see things and how you do things. And it also changes the information you seek and what you read and the theories and beliefs you hold, as well as how you write, So us as writers, we are also interested in personal development and in healing from trauma and abuse and all kinds of things that happen to us along the way in our childhood and in our adolescence and in our teens and in our adulthood and all of that. But also we are writers. We are writers of nonfiction and fiction and screenplays for movies and plays and all kinds of things, And so this process also applies to your growth and your development as a writer and your quest for perfection. I know we can never reach really perfection, and it's not about perfecting, but in our striving to be better and better, we want to learn about the craft of writing, and we want to apply it and develop these skills and become better as writers, So, and all these small changes eventually add up to big change or transformation. And there's a lot of these coaches and people out there promising transformation. And so, and they throw this word about very recklessly, carelessly. And I'm using it here very consciously, and knowing that transformation, personal transformation is a big thing. It's a difficult thing. It's an arduous process, and it does not come easily. And yeah, let me not talk too much. So this system, this process, this rhythm, who does it work for? I'd like to think it works for everything and everyone. So it certainly worked for me writing nonfiction, So my whole journey, our healing adventure, was about healing from trauma and abuse, childhood trauma and abuse, which is a very difficult thing. It's not something that's not very well understood, that only in the last few years that we've made significant, genuine progress in understanding this, So if you want to heal, then that thing of taking action, of applying, first of knowledge, seeking out those writers and those thinkers and psychologists and researchers that are at the cutting edge, and reading them, but sometimes studying them, like a really, you read carefully and slowly, you make notes, you draw mind maps and models and all kinds of things. And you find the theories, the core things that you can apply to change your life, to change how you feel inside, because trauma affects us in so many ways. And I don't want to turn this into a psychological discussion because we're talking about writing here, but it applies also to fiction. And how does it apply to fiction? It's because, I mean, we all have our own beginning of our process, where we get our ideas from, where we get our inspiration from. And for me, it's also adventure. You know, when I go on adventures or I go into nature and I have time to really ponder and think, but also drawing from my life. And then I get the seed of an idea and like, what if there was this guy and this thing was happening where you wanted to, you know, whatever it is, you start with an idea and, and you start getting into it, you start fleshing it out and you start expanding on the idea. And, you know, so it's not like nonfiction where you, okay, let me put it this way. So when I'm writing a story, then I'll initially brainstorm it and you know, try to expand on it and take it as far as I can. And I'll start writing the first chapter, or sometimes sporadically, you know, the ideas that really flesh out at me, and there's a lot there and it's exciting. And so I start writing, and then I get to a point where I'm stuck again, you know. And so I can push through it and force myself, but it's frustrating and it's hard work and it's not fun anymore. And so yeah, you withdraw, you step back from it. And yeah, there's many different things that that's missing in your process, that's preventing you from going forward. So one of them is simply that, you know, our brains had machines, organic machines with billions of neurons reaching out to billions of other neurons. And when you start thinking in a certain path, then you create neural networks which reach out to other neural networks. And so you have this pattern that you're thinking into. And if it's very logical, left brain kind of thinking, you know, outside in and top down, you know, then you can get stuck in a certain framework, in a certain pattern. And also, these neurons, these cells, they use energy, and they, like on a daily basis, they get tired, you know. And so like at the end of the day, for a lot of people, if you don't take your massive dose of caffeine, your tea or your coffee or your whatever, you're going to be tired and your mind's going to get fuzzy and you're not going to feel like writing, you know. So in addition to having the 4 seasons cycle, you've also got the daily cycle where you wake up and you're fresh and you're alert. And yeah, you can work very well in those first few hours, and then maybe by the late afternoon you get a bit tired. And so some people will take a hit of caffeine then and power through. But other people, like Stephen King, I think it is, who uses the afternoon hours to read and the evening hours to relax and enjoy with his family, you know. So for him, it's not a long-term cycle, it's a daily cycle, and he likes to write continuously, and that works for him. But that's because he's managed to micromanage this cycle into a daily rhythm. And for me, I like the more long-term rhythm. So I do try to manage my day around a daily rhythm as well, but it's more the long-term rhythm for me, you know. So now, as a fiction writer, you come against, I mean, okay, I was talking about the neurons. You need to let the neurons rest. You need to let the left brain logical patterns, you need to withdraw from that a little and engage the imaginative right brains, loose connections, symbolic imagination, and metaphoric, mythological systems, and to draw from that, you know. And so you can get stuck there and not be able to reconnect with this. And the only way to do that is to completely forget about the whole thing, you know. So the idea is seeded, it's there, don't worry, you're not going to forget it. But you put it aside and you go out for a walk, you go into nature, and you know, like the great geniuses and masters of the time, you know, people who made massive breakthroughs in science and technology or whatever, you know, when they put the thing aside and they go out for a walk, and exactly when they stop thinking about it, that's when this visionary insight flashes through their mind and they get the solution. And so you're not looking for a specific solution to the equation. You're looking for these imaginative ways of representing the characters, the plot, the stories, the things you're grappling with and dealing with. And a lot of them are not immediately accessible to your logical left brain, and you have to access them this in an imaginative way. I'll talk later a bit about Jungian psychology and active imagination. And another thing to keep in mind with fiction is that a lot of times we're writing about stuff that we don't fully know and understand yet. You know, you could be writing a period piece or fantasy, epic adventure, medieval thing, or sci-fi futuristic thing, and there's a lot of little bits and pieces that you need to research. And so you need to read some fiction in that genre, in that period, but you also need to research like historical things about that time, and the science of engines or whatever it is, you know, things that are going to give your story and your character more depth and more believability. And yeah, these are very important things, you know. And if you just power through and you just say, okay, no, I need to write it, and you know, you're going to push yourself, but you're not going to have this opportunity to because you write and you take yourself to a certain stage, and then when you get there, you realize all the gaps, and then you have this opportunity now to fill all these gaps, and then to go at it again. But before you go at it again, there's also this development of the craft of writing, you know, so the skill and the art of it, you know. So some people went to university and they studied this thing, and then they had a job and, you know, as a journalist or copy editor or book editor or whatever it is, you know, and they've got like years and years of background. And even them need to read books from other people, like, you know, the masters, the legends of our craft, like Tolkien's book about writing on fairy stories. And then you've got Stephen King's book, and you've got, I really enjoyed Jeff Vandermeer's Wonder Book. There's lots and lots of books on craft, and Robert McKee's Story, and Tobias 20 Plots and How to Build Them. And you know, when you get stuck, sometimes it's also because your craft is not where it should be or could be, you know, and there's always room for improvement. And so you want to improve dialogue, so read about dialogue. You want to improve how you express your characters, express emotion. Emotion is the key, you know, it's the essence. And there's so many excellent YouTube videos. I enjoy Abby Emmons, I enjoy Jed Hearn, Sanderson, lots and lots of resources, free stuff, but there's also paid stuff. There are audiobooks and all kinds of things, you know. So now you've withdrawn, you've gone in, you've enhanced your knowledge about your story, you've enhanced your knowledge about the craft, and now you go in and you apply it. You start practicing what you've learned about applying, making your dialogue more interesting, and not doing this kind of on-the-nose exposition, and pacing your story, and all of these things. You know, there's so much to learn. And as if you don't allow yourself this time, this part of the process to enhance your craft, then you're losing such an important, vital dimension of the whole process. You know, I could go on and on about this stuff, but let me leave it at that. But also, by stopping studying and researching, and stopping writing, and stopping everything, and just relaxing and breathing, and you know, maybe if you're into mindfulness meditation, you do a bit of that, or if you're into nature, go out into nature, go for a hike, get moving. And yeah, this resets the system in a good way, you know. So all your notes are still there, everything you've written is still there. Back it up, triple back it up. But yeah, clear your mind and yeah, open the way for new development. So it also works for screenplay. Screenplay is very similar to fiction, so I'm not going to replay all the same things I've talked about apply, but it also works for healing, you know. So forget about writing. You as a person, before you're a writer, you're a human being, and you are on a healing process, and your characters, your protagonists, even your antagonists, your villains, are also on a healing process, you know. And if you can understand the human dilemma, the core human condition, then it's going to help you in your life and your relationships and everything, but it's also going to help you to understand your characters and to know what they're going through and what they're dealing with and what choices they make and how they speak about what they're going through. All of that is going to make your story much more interesting. And yeah, so it also applies to art, different forms of art, whether you're a painter or a photographer or videographer, or whatever your art form is. The same psychical process also applies to artists. And it applies to jobs, you know, all kinds of jobs, even if you're, okay, not civil engineer, but, you know, lots of jobs require that. No, civil engineering as well, why not? You've got to study and you've got to apply what you've studied, and you've got to calculate, and you've got to relax also, you know. So it's, but having said all of that, it's not necessarily for everybody. Some people work in certain kind of environments with a team, and so they can't force a rhythm on everybody. But yeah, the main idea is to look within and to feel your way back into your body and to know what you need right now, you know. So when you're getting stuck, you got to breathe. You got to try and push through, but if you can't push through, you got to feel like, what's going on? What do I need right now? Where do I need to be? Okay, so in Greek mythology, you've got Hades abducts Persephone. So Demeter is the goddess of growth, mainly of agricultural growth. And she has this daughter with Zeus. She has this beautiful child named Persephone. And Persephone is this free-spirited, creative, archetypal goddess. And one day she's roaming in the fields. She's picking flowers with her friends, and the ground suddenly opens up, and out comes Hades, the god of the underworld, and he grabs Persephone and he takes her down into the underworld. And Demeter is heartbroken. She's shocked. She's horrified. You know, her beautiful child is gone, and she doesn't know where she is or what's going on. And she searches the whole world for her daughter, but she can't find her. And in her grief and her despair, she neglects her duties as the goddess of growth, of agriculture, and still everything stops growing. And this is a big problem for everybody, you know. And so Helios, the sun, who sees everything, tells Demeter what happened. And so she goes to Zeus, and Zeus now has to compel Hades to return the child. So Hades loves this girl, but nobody says no to Zeus, so he has to send her back to her mom. And there's different versions of the story. In some versions, she was forcefully abducted. In other versions, she loved him, or she grew to love him, or whatever it is. You know how these Greek mythological stories goes. But anyways, Zeus forces Hades to return her, but along the way, Hades tricks her. He gives her 6, what do you call these things? Pomegranate seeds to eat, and having eaten from them, she is now a denizen of the underworld. She has to return there. And so they find this compromise. where she'll spend 6 months of the year above the ground with her mother, with Demeter, and she'll spend 6 months of the year in the underworld with Hades. And so she becomes this go-between between the dark and the light, or the below and the above, and the dead and the living, and the seasons as well. So that's like the Greek mythological explanation for the season. So you'll have the seasons where things grow, and that's when she's with Demeter, with her mother, and the seasons where things stop growing, when she's in the underworld with Hades. But in the underworld with Hades, she's got other duties and responsibilities there. She's helping lost souls to find their way. She's the guide. She guides lost souls, And in the realm of the living, and she brings spring, and she brings creativity and imagination and artistry and things like that, And so it's also very interesting in Jungian psychology. So if you're not familiar with Jungian psychology, this might look very complicated, but it's not that bad. You've got this dividing line in horizontally, that's between consciousness and the unconscious. And so Jung saw this story, this myth of Persephone, as a way to also represent, well, not just the dead and the living, but the unconscious and the conscious. And Persephone's journey is a way back and through the unconscious, and bringing unknown, hidden things about ourselves, all that denied desires and repressed emotions and unlived aspirations and core beliefs, automatic thinking, that's all in the implicit unconscious, in the viscera, in the bodily system, in the implicit emotional memory, kind of, that we can sometimes access through our dreams, but also through active imagination in the Jungian system. And, that's a way of calming yourself down. It's almost like a mindfulness meditation, but you have to relax and get yourself into the state of reverie, where you can allow your imagination to give you symbols and images, So some people are more visual, and they get visual symbols and visual images. Other people are more, auditory. They hear, or some people are more, we think. So you get thoughts, you get ideas. And so whatever kind of imagination you have, you open yourself up to those things arising into your conscious mind. And that's very important for us as writers, but also for us as individuals trying to heal. So I'm not going to go into all the details of the Jungian system. I mean, it's very interesting from a personal perspective, but also as a writer. There are other psychological systems also, but yeah, this core one in the middle there, about between the ego and the shadow, it's so useful to get into that, because that's how the conscious mind is kind of split between this person that you have to be out there for society, for your family, for the public, and so you have all these different personas, which are these masks, So Jung coined the term persona, which is the mask that the actors used to wear in their performances, So like Shakespeare said, the world is but a stage, and we are all players, actors on stage, because we're all, to some extent, performing who we think we need to be. Whether those personas are based on religious kind of expectations and rules, or cultural, or family, or whatever it is that we have to become in order to be accepted and to be liked and to be somebody important, And yeah, so like there's a lot of that. I mean, there's also a lot of authentic expression that we have, and authentic people in the world. But a lot of us have these personas that we acquired that is not really who we are. And what that means is that there's a shadow side to us, which is all the parts, those parts I talked about earlier, the denied desires and repressed emotions and unloved aspirations and all this automatic thinking that is in your shadow self. It's parts of you that want to live themselves out, but they can't. They have to hide away. And so it's only behind closed and locked doors that these shadow aspects will begin to express themselves. Or sometimes there's even what they call the shadow possession, where the shadow kind of takes you over and lives itself out for a little while. But it's almost always when nobody is looking, because there's this diabolization of the personality structure of the psyche between the internal and the external, or the unconscious and the conscious. But it's fascinating, and I'll encourage you to look into it. There's so much to talk about. I mean, down at the bottom, he's talking about the archetypes and self. So how do we get to a more authentic expression of who we really are, ourselves? And that is the core of every protagonist's journey. Well, not every protagonist. You have the Flat Ark, which is a character who's really interesting and who has a really powerful perspective that changes the world. But you also have characters who start off at a certain level, and then they grow and they grow, and they have a realization, an aha moment, and they become different. They change, they transform in some way, and there can be a positive arc, there can be a negative arc. Your villain, your antagonist can have an arc. There's so many different, well, there are a few different permutations of that. But archetypes, there are so many archetypes. Like for me, one that is very prevalent is the archetype of the black sheep and the scapegoat. Until I realized that I've been the black sheep of my family, and I've been playing out this role of the scapegoat. And not just in my family system. As you go on, you start to play that role in other places as well, in other situations, in your work or your religious or your whatever organizations you become a part of. But then there are archetypes of the hero. When we were kids, we watched Superman and all of these movies, and now you wanted to be you wanted to be the hero who saves people, and this becomes a part of your personality. It becomes a complex, something that you want to play out, and it's not necessarily always positive, and like I went for this Jungian individuation course with the South African Jungian Society, and it was brilliant. Wow. It changed so many things for me. And, one of the things that stood out for me, besides active imagination and was this thing of these archetypal stories, and especially the stories in your childhood that really gripped your imagination, and that you couldn't wait to watch. So for me, it was MacGyver, who was this guy. So every week, MacGyver was off to some part of the world to help people, and he was using science and technology to solve problems and to help them against these bad guys who were, like, most often corrupt governments and these bloated corporations trying to take advantage of people. And MacGyver hated guns, and although he had his MacGyver knife, but not to hurt anyone. It had all these screwdrivers and so on, and gadgets and scissors and all kinds of things, So I had to have my MacGyver knife, and I had to. I wanted to travel the world, and I wanted to help people, and I wanted to use science, and so I wanted to be like MacGyver, And there were other stories. There's also the story of the Buddha and how he left his home and went out to in search of self-realization, to try to awaken and to actually awaken. There's a whole nother long story, but yeah, it all begins with adventure. So go out there and blow your mind. But it also requires self-awareness. So feel your way back into your body and heart. And, and that's going to be what guides you in your choices, in your decisions, in what you feel you need to do next in your process. And yeah, that's about it. So yeah, in conclusion, I think I've covered everything already. So yeah, what else? Let me just leave it at that. Oh yeah, let me recap. So yeah, we're talking about yeah, you have an adventure and then you you start studying and reading about something and you gather knowledge, you apply that knowledge, and then you have experience. You write about it and you heal, and then you relax. And that's it.